I'd just like a table for one, please.
Here, look at yourself. You smell like a dumpster. This is a $200 a plate restaurant, not a homeless shelter. Get out before I call the cops.
Sir, I just want to eat. I can pay.
Pay with what, girl? I make more in a week than you'll see in your life. Now move your dirty feet off my floor before I move them for you.
The dining room went dead silent. 50 people sat frozen. A black woman in a paint-stained hoodie stood at the entrance of one of Atlanta's most expensive restaurants. A white manager blocked her path, chin raised, arms crossed, smirking like he'd already won. He had no idea who she was. He had no idea what was coming. But I promise you this, by the end of this story, you're going to watch this man lose everything. And it all started with a glass of Coke. To understand what happened inside that restaurant, you need to know who this woman really was. And more importantly, you need to know why she was dressed like that. Her name was Wanda Richardson, and on any given weekday, you might find her stepping out of a black Mercedes in a tailored blazer, walking into boardrooms where people stood up when she entered. Because Wanda Richardson was the wife of Garrett Richardson, founder and CEO of Apex Dynamics, a defense and aerospace technology company valued at $4.8 billion. But today was Saturday, and every Saturday for the past 6 years, Wanda didn't touch the Mercedes. She didn't wear the blazer. She didn't put on a single piece of jewelry. Instead, she woke up at 6 in the morning inside their estate in the Tuxedo Park neighborhood of Atlanta. She walked past the marble countertops, past the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private garden, and reached into the back of her closet for the same outfit she wore every weekend. A faded Spelman College hoodie, a pair of paint-stained joggers, and a pair of sneakers so worn the soles were peeling at the edges. Garrett was already at the kitchen island, reading through a stack of contracts. He looked up as she passed. "You're going to eat lunch today, right?" "I'll try," she said, kissing him on the forehead. She grabbed her keys, not to the Mercedes, not to the Range Rover, but to a 10-year-old Honda Civic parked at the far end of the driveway, and she drove herself across town to Hope Bridge Community Center, a non-profit she had personally founded 3 years ago to serve families in need. By 8 o'clock, Wanda was hauling boxes of donated winter coats through the back door. By 9, she was on her knees sorting school supplies into bags. By 10, she was sitting cross-legged on the floor with a group of kids, helping them sound out words in a reading circle. One little girl, couldn't have been older than 6, drew a picture in crayon. It was a stick figure in a purple hoodie with big curly hair. Underneath it, in wobbly letters, she had written, "Miss Wanda, my hero!" Wanda folded that drawing and tucked it into her pocket. By noon, she was helping repaint the center's reading nook. Sky blue on the walls, sunshine yellow on the trim. She got paint on her hoodie, on her joggers, even on her chin. She laughed and kept going. Around 1 o'clock, her stomach growled loud enough for the other volunteers to hear. A woman named Patrice nudged her. "Girl, you skipped lunch again. The Grandview Grill is right up the road. Go eat something real." Wanda hesitated. She knew the Grandview. It was a trendy spot in Buckhead. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulb lighting, craft cocktails on chalkboard menus. The kind of place where people wore blazers on a Saturday afternoon. She looked down at her paint-splattered hoodie, her dusty sneakers, her hands still flecked with sky blue. "I look a mess," she said. "So what? Your money spends the same. Go eat." So Wanda grabbed her reusable grocery bag, still full of donated children's books she planned to drop off later, and drove 10 minutes north to Buckhead. She parked the Civic on the street. She walked through the front door of the Grandview Grill, and within 60 seconds of stepping inside, her entire life was about to change. The restaurant was packed. Well-dressed couples sipped wine at candlelit tables. A group of men in golf pools laughed near the bar. The smell of seared steak and rosemary hung thick in the air. A young hostess named Courtney looked up from her stand. She smiled and opened her mouth to greet Wanda, but she never got the chance, because Bryce Colton got there first. Bryce Colton was 28 years old, 6'1", and had the kind of confidence that comes from never once being told no. He'd been shift manager at the Grandview Grill for 11 months, and in those 11 months, He had made it his personal mission to keep the restaurant looking, as he liked to say, on brand. That meant no wrinkled shirts, no flip-flops, no anyone who didn't look like they could afford the menu. And it especially meant no one who might make his regulars, the golf polo guys, the wine and steak couples, the corporate lunch crowd, feel like the neighborhood was slipping. He spotted Wanda before she'd taken 3 steps past the door. Paint-stained hoodie, scuffed sneakers, a reusable bag that looked like it came from a thrift store donation bin. And she was black. Bryce didn't hesitate, not even for a second. He stepped in front of the hostess podium, physically cutting off Courtney mid-greeting, and planted himself directly in Wanda's path. His arms crossed over his chest, his chin lifted. His voice carried across the entire dining room like he wanted every single person in the building to hear what he was about to say. "Excuse me, ma'am. This isn't a shelter. We have a dress code." Wanda stopped. She looked up at him. Her voice was steady, almost soft. The voice of someone who had learned a long time ago that calmness was its own kind of power. "I'd just like a table for one, please." Bryce let out a short laugh through his nose. Not a real laugh, a performance. He turned to Courtney with a theatrical eye roll, gesturing at Wanda like she was something he'd found stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Courtney, did we start taking walk-ins from Goodwill?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter came from a table near the window. 2 women in matching designer sunglasses glanced at each other. One covered her mouth with manicured fingers. The other looked away and sipped her wine. Wanda didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on Bryce. Her hands stayed at her sides. Her grocery bag hung from her wrist, heavy with children's books. "I'd like to be seated, please. I'm happy to wait if there's no table available right now." Bryce tilted his head sideways. He looked her up and down, slowly, deliberately, starting at her scuffed sneakers and dragging his gaze all the way up to her paint-flecked hair, the way someone inspects something they've already decided to throw in the trash. "Ma'am, I'm going to be real with you." His voice dripped with the kind of politeness that isn't polite at all. "We have a strict dress code here at the Grandview. No athletic wear, no stained clothing, no open bags." He pointed one finger at her reusable grocery bag. "That's 3 violations, right there. I didn't make the rules." But he did make the rules, because there were no rules. The Grandview Grill had never once posted a dress code. Not on the door, not on the website, not on the menu. Bryce had invented it on the spot, right there, standing in front of a woman whose only crime was walking in while black and underdressed. Wanda glanced to her left. 2 tables over, a white man in his late 50s sat eating a bacon cheeseburger with his fingers. He wore a faded Atlanta Braves baseball cap pulled low over his forehead, wrinkled gym shorts that stopped above his pale knees, and a pair of rubber sandals with no socks. His bare feet were propped up on the empty chair across from him. Ketchup dotted the front of his shirt. "That gentleman over there," Wanda said quietly, nodding in his direction, "is wearing gym shorts, a baseball cap, and sandals. There's ketchup on his shirt. Does the dress code not apply to him?" Bryce didn't even turn his head to look. "That's different. He's a regular." "So the dress code is selective." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. And the way she said it, calm, precise, without a single trace of anger, made Bryce's neck flush red above his collar. Something shifted in his face. The amusement drained out of it like water through a crack. His jaw tightened. His nostrils flared just slightly. He took a half step forward, closing the distance between them until Wanda could smell the coffee on his breath. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, harder, stripped of the fake politeness he'd been wearing like a mask. "Look, I don't know where you came from. I don't know what you think this place is. But I'm telling you right now, you are making our guests uncomfortable. You are disrupting the dining experience. And I need you to leave. Immediately." Wanda's hands didn't move. Her breathing didn't change. Her voice stayed level, the way a lake stays level even when stones are being thrown into it. "I'm not leaving. I haven't done anything wrong. I'd like to speak with the general manager, please." "I am the manager on duty." "Then I'd like your full name and the name of the company that owns this restaurant." Bryce laughed again, but this time the laugh had teeth. There was an edge behind it. Not fear, not yet, but the kind of raw annoyance that comes when someone you've already dismissed refuses to disappear. When someone you've already decided is beneath you dares to stand at your level and look you in the eye. You want to file a complaint? He spread his arms wide, playing to the room. Go right ahead, sweetheart. Call whoever you want. Write a letter. Post it online. I promise you, nobody is going to believe someone who looks like you over someone like me. Someone who looks like you over someone like me. Every person within earshot heard it. The meaning was clear. It was never about a dress code. It was never about stained clothing or open bags or the comfort of guests. It was about skin. It had always been about skin. A woman at the bar set her glass down slowly. A couple near the window exchanged a long look. The hostess, Courtney, stared at the tile floor, her face burning red, her lips pressed shut. And then Bryce Colton did something that no one in that restaurant expected. Something that would be replayed on screens across the country for weeks to come. He turned to the nearest bus tray, a gray plastic bin sitting on a stand beside the hostess podium, and grabbed a half-full glass of Coca-Cola. Condensation dripped from the outside of the glass. The ice inside had barely begun to melt. He looked Wanda dead in the eyes, and in one smooth, deliberate motion, he tipped the glass forward and poured the Coca-Cola directly onto her chest. The brown liquid hit her hoodie with a wet slap that echoed off the brick walls. Ice cubes bounced off her collarbone and clattered across the hardwood floor. Cola streamed down the front of her shirt, soaking through the cotton to her skin beneath. A dark stain bloomed from her chest to her stomach like a wound spreading open. Droplets spattered her sneakers. A puddle formed around her feet. The restaurant didn't go quiet. It went dead. Not a whisper, not a cough, not the scrape of a single chair. The jazz music piping through the speakers suddenly sounded obscenely loud in all that silence. Wanda stood perfectly still. Coke dripped from the hem of her hoodie in a slow, steady rhythm. A single ice cube rested on the toe of her left shoe. She could feel the cold liquid running down her ribs beneath her shirt. She did not wipe her face. She did not step back. She did not cry. Bryce set the empty glass back on the bus tray with a light clink. He wiped his wet hand on his black apron. Then he leaned in, close, too close, until his mouth was inches from her ear. Oops. His whisper was loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. Now you really don't meet the dress code. He straightened up. He pointed one finger toward the front door, and he smiled. Door's that way, sweetheart. Wanda still did not move. She stood in that puddle of Coca-Cola with her chin level, her shoulders back, and her eyes fixed on Bryce Colton's face. She was memorizing him, every crease, every pore, every ounce of cruelty sitting behind that smirk. At a table near the kitchen pass-through, a woman named Denise Alford sat with her phone raised in both trembling hands. She had started recording the moment Bryce first raised his voice at the hostess stand. She had captured every word, every gesture, every single frame of that Coca-Cola arcing through the air and hitting Wanda's chest. Her screen showed 8 minutes and counting. She didn't stop recording. She couldn't. Behind the kitchen window, Chef Elena Davis stood frozen, her knuckles white against the stainless steel counter. Her jaw was locked so tight her teeth ached. She had seen Bryce do this before. Not the drink, but the humiliation, the profiling, the selective enforcement of rules that didn't exist. She had reported him 3 times to the corporate, 3 written complaints. 3 times she was told the same thing. He keeps the dining room running smooth. Leave it alone. She turned to the line cook beside her and whispered through clenched teeth, "This isn't the first time, but I swear to God it's going to be the last." At the hostess stand, Courtney gripped the wooden edge of her podium with both hands until her fingernails turned white. Her eyes were wet. Her bottom lip trembled. She wanted to say something. She wanted to hand Wanda a napkin, a towel, anything. But Bryce was her boss, and she was 22, and she was afraid. So she said nothing. Nobody said anything. The only sound in the Grand View grill was the slow, steady drip of Coca-Cola hitting the hardwood floor. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Wanda still hadn't moved. Bryce stared at her. His smirk was cracking at the edges. He had expected her to cry. He had expected her to curse at him or shuffle out the door with her head down, the way the others had. The ones before her. The ones nobody talked about. But this woman just stood there, soaked in coke, calm as concrete, looking at him like she was reading the fine print of his soul. It unnerved him. And when Bryce Colton felt unnerved, he didn't get quiet. He got louder. He snapped his fingers at a busboy, a skinny kid named Travis, barely 19, standing near the service station pretending not to see what just happened. The snap echoed like a firecracker. "Travis, mop! Now! Clean this mess up!" He jerked his thumb toward the puddle around Wanda's feet. "And make sure she's gone before the evening crowd gets here." Travis didn't move. He stood holding a bin of dirty dishes, eyes darting between Bryce and Wanda. His knuckles were white around the bin's edges. Bryce had already turned back to Wanda. He planted both hands on his hips and leaned forward until his shadow fell across her face. His voice dropped into something low and thick, like syrup mixed with venom. "Honey, I don't know where you wandered in from. I don't know what bus dropped you off. But let me make something crystal clear so even you can understand it." He paused. Let the silence sharpen his next words into a blade. "This place is not for people like you. It never was. It never will be. So take your little bag of whatever that is, walk out that door and go find a soup kitchen. I'm sure they'll have something more than your speed. People like you." He said it again, louder this time, not a whisper, a declaration. And every person in that room heard exactly what those words meant. There was no ambiguity, no dress code, no policy, just a white man in a pressed black apron telling a black woman in a paint-stained hoodie that she did not deserve to exist in the same room as him. A man at the bar turned his body away, staring at the liquor bottles like they held answers. A young couple near the patio whispered urgently, faces tight with something between disgust and cowardice. They wanted to leave. They didn't want to be the ones who stood up. Wanda let out a slow breath through her nose, the kind that holds back 1,000 words. She wiped a streak of Coca-Cola from her cheek with the back of her hand. Her fingers were steady, her eyes were dry. Not because she didn't feel it, but because she had decided that this man would not get a single tear from her. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet the nearest table leaned forward to hear. "I'd like your full name, and I'd like it now." Bryce barked a laugh, sharp and ugly like something breaking. "My name? You want my name?" He grabbed the front of his apron and pulled it taut so she could read the embroidered tag. "Bryce Colton, shift manager, employee of the month, 3 times running. Go ahead, sweetheart. File your little complaint. I'll still be here tomorrow, and you'll still be out there." Wanda didn't respond. She took 2 steps to the side, reached into her pocket, and pulled out her phone. A simple phone in a plain black case. Nothing that would make a man like Bryce look twice. She dialed 1 number. Speed dial. Pressed it to her ear. Bryce watched with arms folded. He assumed she was calling a friend, a sister, someone from whatever shelter he'd invented for her in his mind. He shook his head and muttered loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Great. Now she's calling for backup. What's next? The whole family shows up in matching tracksuits?" 2 women at a corner table laughed nervously. A man at the bar shook his head but said nothing. On the other end, Garrett Richardson picked up before the first ring finished. Wanda's voice was calm, measured. The voice of a woman who had already decided exactly what would happen next. "I'm at the Grandview Grill, on Peachtree. A manager threw a drink on me and refused me service. I'm fine, but I need you to look into who owns this place." She didn't explain further. 6 years of marriage had built a language between them that lived underneath words. Garrett heard the stillness in her voice. He understood what it meant. His voice didn't rise, it dropped. It became the voice that silenced boardrooms, the voice he used when someone breached a contract, when someone touched what was his. 3 words. "Don't leave yet." The call ended. Wanda slid the phone into her pocket. Her face gave nothing away. Within 4 minutes, Garrett's executive assistant pulled the corporate registry for the Grand View Grill. The restaurant was owned by Sterling Hospitality Group, a mid-size conglomerate managing 43 properties across the Southeast. And Sterling Hospitality Group was currently negotiating a $200 million contract with Apex Dynamics for their corporate hospitality division. The paperwork was drafted. The lawyers had reviewed it. All that was missing was Garrett's signature. That signature was never going to come. Back inside, Bryce knew none of this. He saw a woman in a ruined hoodie who had made a phone call that would change nothing. He saw weakness. He walked back toward her, slow, theatrical. He wanted every eye on him. "Are you still here? Seriously? Do I need to call the police? Because I will." Wanda looked at him the way you look at the weather, something you cannot control and do not need to fight. "You can call whoever you want. I'm not leaving." Anger flashed across Bryce's face, hot and red, blooming from his collar to his ears. He yanked out his phone and dialed the non-emergency line. He turned away from Wanda but spoke loud enough for the dining room to hear. "Yes, hi. I need officers at the Grand View Grill on Peachtree. I've got a trespasser refusing to leave. She's being aggressive and confrontational. She's making guests feel unsafe." Aggressive. He used the word aggressive about a woman who hadn't raised her voice once, who was still wearing the coke he'd poured on her, who still hadn't clenched a fist. He hung up and turned back with fresh confidence, arms crossed, chin up, smirk locked in place. "Cops are on their way, sweetheart. Last chance to walk out with whatever dignity you've got left." Wanda said nothing. Her hoodie clung to her chest, cold and damp. Her sneakers stuck to the floor. The bag of children's books hung heavy from her wrist, covers warped from the splash. She looked like exactly what Bryce wanted. Small, powerless, defeated. But she wasn't any of those things. 7 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up outside. No lights, no siren. 2 officers stepped through the front door. Bryce rushed toward them, voice pitched high with manufactured relief. "Officers, thank God! This woman has been causing a disturbance for 20 minutes. She doesn't meet our dress code. She's refused to leave. She's trespassing." The officers looked past him. They saw Wanda near the hostess podium, a black woman in a soaked hoodie, arms at her sides, no weapon, no raised voice, just standing in a puddle of soda dripping onto hardwood. The older officer, Sergeant Hollins, 22 years on the force, frowned. He looked at Bryce, at Wanda, at the puddle, at the empty glass on the bus tray still wet around the rim. Something didn't add up. "Ma'am," he said, stepping past Bryce, "are you all right? Can you tell me what happened here?" Before Wanda could answer, a chair scraped hard against the floor. Every head turned. Denise Alford was standing, phone raised in her trembling hand. The screen is bright, red recording dot blinking. Her voice shook, but it carried across the entire room. "Officer, I recorded everything. From the very beginning. He threw a drink on this woman. He's been harassing her since she walked in. I have the whole thing on video, every single second." Sergeant Hollins looked at the phone, looked at his partner. Something passed between them without words. Then he turned to Bryce. "Sir, I'm going to need to see that video, and I'm going to need you to step over here with me. Now." The smirk on Bryce Colton's face died the way a candle dies when you pinch the wick. The left corner dropped first, then the right. Then the light behind his eyes went dark. For the first time since Wanda walked through that door, Bryce Colton had nothing to say. Sergeant Hollins and his partner watched the video in silence. 8 minutes and 43 seconds. Denise held the phone steady while both officers leaned in, their faces hardening with every frame. They saw Bryce block the door. They heard the goodwill joke. They watched him pour Coca-Cola onto a woman who had done nothing but ask for a table. And they heard him say it, twice, "People like you." When the video ended, Sergeant Hollins looked up at his partner. He didn't need to say a word. They both knew what they were looking at. At that exact moment, a sleek black Escalade pulled to the curb outside. The engine was still running when the rear door opened. Garrett Richardson stepped out. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, no tie, top button undone. 2 members of his executive security detail flanked him, both in dark blazers, both with earpieces, both scanning the sidewalk before he took his first step. He moved through the front door of the Grand View Grill like he owned it. And in a sense, after what was about to happen, he might as well have. The energy inside the restaurant shifted the instant he crossed the threshold. It was like someone had changed the frequency of the room. A man at the bar sat up straighter. A woman near the window grabbed her husband's arm and whispered something urgent. Two businessmen at a corner table froze mid-conversation. One of them pulled out his phone and started typing, because they recognized him. Garrett Richardson had been on the cover of Forbes twice, Bloomberg Businessweek once, Black Enterprise 3 times. His face had appeared on CNN, CNBC, and the front page of the Wall Street Journal. He was the founder and CEO of Apex Dynamics, a $4.8 billion defense and aerospace company that employed 11,000 people across 6 states. And he was walking straight toward the woman in the soaked hoodie. He reached Wanda and stopped. He didn't speak right away. He looked at her, at the dark Coca-Cola stain spreading across her chest, at the damp hem of her hoodie, at the sticky residue on her sneakers. His jaw tightened, his nostrils flared. A vein pulsed once along the side of his neck. He reached out and touched the wet I suggest you take her and leave before this gets worse for both of you. Garrett turned to face him, slowly, the way a man turns when he wants you to feel every degree of the rotation. This woman, his lips parted, his hands dropped to his sides. Garrett pulled out his phone and dialed. The speaker was on. The entire restaurant could hear the ringing, and then the voice of Howard Slade, Sterling Hospitality Group's regional director, answering on the second ring. Mr. Richardson, good afternoon. Howard, I'm standing inside your restaurant, the Grand View Grill. One of your managers just poured a glass of Coca-Cola on my wife and called her homeless. He refused her service. He called the police on her, and he did it all because she's black and wasn't dressed the way he thought she should be. Silence on the other end. Then a stammering breath. Mr. Richardson, please, I'm sure we can discuss. There's nothing to discuss. The contract is terminated, effective immediately. Your company's values are clear, and I want you to know my legal team will be in contact before the end of the day. He ended the call, slid the phone into his jacket pocket, didn't look at it again. Bryce stood frozen. His mouth moved but produced no sound. His brain was trying to assemble a sentence, any sentence, that could undo the last 60 seconds of his life. Finally, words came. Small, broken, pathetic. I didn't know. I just thought she was... Wanda cut him off. She stepped forward. One step, just one. But it closed the distance between them in a way that made Bryce take a half step back. Her voice was quiet, but every person in that silent restaurant heard it. You thought what? That a black woman in a hoodie doesn't deserve to eat here? That she couldn't possibly belong in a place like this? She held his gaze. That's exactly the problem. Bryce opened his mouth again. Nothing came out. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking. The apron he had been so proud of hung crooked on his chest. The Employee of the Month tag catching the overhead light like a joke nobody was laughing at anymore. The silence that followed Wanda's words lasted exactly 5 seconds. But to Bryce Colton, standing in the middle of his own restaurant with Coca-Cola still drying on the floor and 50 pairs of eyes locked on his face, it felt like 5 years. Then the silence broke, and everything broke with it. Bryce's legs buckled first. Not physically, but something inside him collapsed. The posture that had carried him all afternoon, the puffed chest, the lifted chin, the crossed arms, all of it crumbled like wet paper. His shoulders dropped. His hands came together in front of his waist, fingers twisting against each other. It was a misunderstanding, he said. His voice cracked on the second syllable. I didn't mean it like that. I swear. I was doing my job. I was trying to maintain standards. That's all. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Nobody in the room believed him. Not the couple near the window who had laughed at his goodwill joke 20 minutes ago and were now staring at their plates in shame. Not Courtney, who stood behind the hostess podium with tears running silently down her cheeks. Not Travis, the busboy, who had finally set down his bin of dishes and was watching from the service station with his arms crossed and his jaw clenched tight. Sergeant Holland stepped forward. He had finished reviewing Denise's video. He had watched it twice, and he had seen enough. "Sir," he said, his voice carrying the flat, practiced calm of a man who had delivered bad news 1,000 times. "Under Georgia law, what you did, throwing that drink, constitutes simple battery. That's unwanted physical contact. It's on video. Multiple witnesses confirm it." Bryce's face went white. Not pale. White. The color of printer paper. "Battery? No, it was just a drink. It was just Coke. I didn't hit her. I never touched her." "You don't have to hit someone for it to be battery, sir. Making offensive physical contact, including throwing a substance on another person, meets the legal threshold. I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." "You can't be serious. You can't. This is my restaurant. I'm the manager here. You can't arrest me in my own restaurant." "Sir, turn around. Hands behind your back. Now." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. Metal against metal. It echoed off the exposed brick walls and the Edison bulb fixtures and the chalkboard cocktail menu. Every diner heard it. Every server. Every bartender. The man in the gym shorts and baseball cap heard it. The two women with designer sunglasses heard it. Bryce Colton was walked out of the Grandview Grill in handcuffs, past the tables he had managed, past the guests he had claimed to protect, past the hostess stand where he had blocked a woman from eating lunch. His head was down. His apron was still on. The Employee of the Month tag swung back and forth with each step. The front door closed behind him. Through the glass, the diners watched him being placed into the back of the patrol car. The overhead lights of the cruiser reflected off the restaurant windows, blue and red washing across white tablecloths and half-finished plates of steak. Inside, Garrett was already on the phone with his legal team. His voice was low and precise. Instructions, not conversations. Within the hour, Apex Dynamics issued a formal statement. All business relationships with Sterling Hospitality Group were terminated immediately, citing a corporate culture that enables racial discrimination. Howard Slade called back 3 times in 30 minutes. The first call, Garrett declined. The second, declined. The third, declined. Each time, Howard's voicemail grew more desperate, offering to fire Bryce, offering a formal apology, offering to fly to Atlanta personally. Garrett didn't respond to any of them. Before Wanda left the restaurant, one person approached her. Chef Elena Davis came out from the kitchen. She had taken off her apron. Her eyes were red. Her hands were clasped together in front of her chest like she was holding something fragile. "I reported him," she said. Her voice broke on the first word. 3 times. I filed 3 complaints with the corporation. They told me to leave it alone. They said he kept the dining room running smooth. She swallowed hard. Nobody listened to me. Nobody did anything. She looked at Wanda. Tears spilled down both cheeks. "Thank you." Wanda reached out and took Elena's hands in hers. She held them. She didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't okay. She didn't say, "It's over," because it wasn't over. She just held this woman's hands in a restaurant that smelled like rosemary and spilled Coca-Cola, and she nodded. That evening, Denise Alford sat in her living room and uploaded the video. She titled it, "Manager Throws Coke on Black Woman at Upscale Atlanta Restaurant." She posted it on 3 platforms. She tagged every local news station she could find. Within 2 hours, it had 500,000 views. Within 4 hours, it crossed 1 million. By midnight, it was at 2 million and climbing. The hashtag appeared just after 10 o'clock that night. 4 words, no spaces. Justice for Wanda. By morning, it was the #1 trending topic in the country. By Monday morning, Wanda Richardson's name was everywhere. Not because she sought it, but because 50 million people had watched a man pour Coca-Cola on her chest and tell her she didn't belong. CNN ran the video in a split-screen segment. MSNBC looped the moment of impact, while legal analysts broke down the case in real time. Local Atlanta affiliates parked satellite trucks outside the Grandview Grill. The restaurant was closed. A handwritten sign taped to the glass read, "Closed until further notice." On Tuesday, Wanda retained Terrence Moore, a civil rights attorney with 26 years of experience and a reputation that preceded him into every courtroom. He had never lost a case he believed in. He believed in this one. Within 72 hours, Moore filed 2 actions: a criminal complaint reinforcing the battery charge, and a civil rights lawsuit against Bryce Colton personally and Sterling Hospitality Group corporately, alleging racial discrimination, assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of Georgia's public accommodation statutes. The discovery phase uncovered something worse than anyone expected. Elena Davis gave a sworn deposition lasting 2 hours. She described Bryce turning away a black couple on their anniversary because the husband wore sneakers, while a white man in flip-flops sat 10 feet away. She described him telling a Latino family the restaurant was fully booked, then seating a white party of 4 at an empty table 5 minutes later. She described him calling black diners "those people" in staff meetings, and she described the 3 formal complaints she had filed with Sterling's Human Resources, each documented, dated, signed, and ignored. 2 former servers came forward next. One described being told by Bryce to keep an eye on tables with black guests because they don't tip and they'll skip out on the check. The other described Bryce instructing the hostess to seat black diners near the kitchen or restrooms, never by the window, because it doesn't look right for the brand. Every statement was sworn. Every statement pointed to the same conclusion. What happened to Wanda was not isolated. It was a pattern, a system, a culture allowed to grow because the people in charge chose to look away. Then came the emails. Moore's team subpoenaed Sterling's internal communications. Buried in a chain between Howard Slade and a regional vice president named Craig Ellsworth was an email dated 11 months before the incident. Elena's second complaint was attached. Beneath it, Ellsworth had written 4 sentences that would become the most damaging evidence in the entire case. "He keeps our clientele looking right. The numbers at Grandview are up 12% since he started. I don't want to lose that over a sensitivity issue. Leave it alone." Those 3 words, "leave it alone," were projected onto a courtroom screen 6 weeks later in front of a judge, a jury, and 6 journalists. The criminal trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution played Denise's full video on the first morning. The jury watched Bryce block the door. They heard the jokes. They watched the coke arc through the air. They heard "people like you" twice. Several jurors looked away during the pour. Bryce's defense attorney argued the drink was accidental, that Bryce reached for the glass and it slipped, that his comments were misinterpreted, that the situation was an unfortunate workplace misunderstanding. The video destroyed that argument. You could see his eyes lock onto Wanda before he tipped the glass, the deliberate angle of his wrist, the smirk that followed. Nothing about it was accidental. The jury deliberated for less than 90 minutes. Guilty, simple battery, 12 months probation, 180 hours of community service at a civil rights education program, $5,000 in fines. His name entered into the criminal record system. The civil lawsuit hit Sterling like a freight train. Faced with the video, Elena's testimony, employee depositions, and Ellsworth's email, all now public record, Sterling's legal team recommended immediate settlement. $3.2 million. The settlement required Sterling to implement mandatory anti-discrimination training across all 43 properties, to hire an independent civil rights compliance officer reporting directly to the board, to establish a formal complaint system with guaranteed response timelines, and to issue a public video apology from the CEO. Craig Ellsworth was terminated. Howard Slade was demoted to a non-client-facing administrative role. 4 other managers who had received discrimination complaints without action were placed on leave pending review. Bryce Colton was permanently barred from employment at any Sterling property. But Wanda wasn't finished. The $3.2 million arrived in a wire transfer on a Thursday. By Friday morning, every cent had been redirected. Not to Wanda's account, not to a financial advisor, to Hope Bridge Community Center. The settlement funded a new building expansion doubling the center's capacity, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, a job training program in hospitality and culinary arts, and a children's library, painted sky blue on the walls and sunshine yellow on the trim, stocked with 3,000 books. Garrett matched it. Apex Dynamics announced a $10 million fund for civil rights legal defense across the Southeast, covering attorney fees, filing costs, and expert witnesses for people who couldn't afford to fight back alone. 1 week later, Wanda agreed to a single interview. One camera, one morning show. She wore a navy blazer and small gold earrings. The host asked what she wanted people to take from her story. Wanda looked into the camera without hesitation. "I wasn't angry for myself. I have resources most people don't. But I stood in that restaurant and thought about how every person turned away because of how they looked. Every person told them they didn't belong. Every person who didn't have someone to make a phone call. Those are the people I was fighting for." The clip was viewed 14 million times in 48 hours. Elena Davis was promoted. Sterling's new compliance officer reviewed her file, noted the 3 ignored complaints, and recommended her for assistant general manager at a renovated Sterling property in Decatur. On her first day, she hung a small framed sign behind her desk. Every voice matters, especially the ones that get ignored. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in early spring, Wanda Richardson woke up at 6 o'clock. She walked past the marble countertops, past the floor-to-ceiling windows where golden light was just beginning to spill across the garden. She reached into the back of her closet and pulled out the same faded Spelman College hoodie. It had been washed dozens of times since that day. But if you looked closely, right below the collar, just left of center, you could still see the faint outline of a stain, a shadow of brown against gray cotton. She had patched it herself with a small square of purple fabric, stitched by hand. She never replaced that hoodie. She wore it every Saturday, not because she had to, because she chose to. Because it reminded her that dignity doesn't come from what you wear. It comes from who you are when someone tries to take it from you. Garrett was at the kitchen island. Same spot, same stack of contracts. He looked up. "Lunch today?" "I'll try," she said. Same answer, same smile, same kiss on the forehead. She drove the Civic across town to Hope Bridge Community Center. But this time, when she pulled into the parking lot, something was different. The building was twice the size it had been 6 months ago. A new wing stretched out from the east side. Bright windows, fresh brick, a mural painted across the entrance wall by local high school students. The mural showed hands of every color reaching upward toward a golden sun. Inside, the new children's library was full. Kids sat cross-legged on a blue carpet, books open in their laps. The shelves were stocked. 3,000 titles, donated from across the country after the story went national. The walls were sky blue. The trim was sunshine yellow, just like the reading nook Wanda had been painting the day everything changed. A little girl, the same one who had drawn the crayon picture months ago, ran up to Wanda the moment she walked through the door. She wrapped her arms around Wanda's waist and squeezed. "Miss Wanda, did you see? They put my drawing on the wall!" Wanda looked up. There it was, framed and mounted near the library entrance. A stick figure in a purple hoodie with big curly hair. Underneath, in wobbly crayon letters, "Miss Wanda, my hero." Wanda knelt down and held that little girl's face in both hands. "I see it, baby. I see it." Across town, Bryce Colton had completed his 12 months of probation and 180 hours of community service. He was no longer employed in hospitality. No restaurant in Atlanta would hire him. His name returned over 400,000 search results, every one of them connected to the video, the trial, and the hashtag that had trended for 11 days straight. He had deleted all his social media accounts. He had moved to a smaller apartment on the south side. The life he had known was gone. Denise Alford, the woman who held her phone steady while her hands shook, had become an advocate for bystander intervention. She spoke at schools, churches, and community centers about the power of recording, the responsibility of witnessing, and the difference one person can make by refusing to look away. The Apex Dynamics Civil Rights Defense Fund had supported 31 discrimination cases in its first year. 14 resulted in settlements. 9 went to trial. All 9 won. And every Saturday, without fail, Wanda Richardson showed up at Hope Bridge in her patched hoodie and scuffed sneakers. She sorted coats. She read to children. She painted walls. She never arrived in the Mercedes. She never wore the blazer. Because the woman who could buy the whole block didn't need anyone to know it. She just needed to be there. Now let me ask you something. And I mean this. Really think about it before you answer. If you were sitting in that restaurant and you watched Bryce Colton pour that glass of Coke on a woman who had done nothing wrong, what would you have done? Would you have looked down at your plate and pretended you didn't see it? Would you have whispered to the person next to you and hoped someone else would step in? Or would you have done what Denise did, pulled out your phone, hit record, and stood up? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because I've got more stories like this coming. And trust me, they only get more intense from here. But before you go, I want you to remember one thing. One thing from this whole story. Carry it with you. Justice doesn't always start in a courtroom. Sometimes it starts with one person who refuses to leave. One person who stands in a puddle of Coca-Cola with her chin up and her shoulders back and says, "I'm not going anywhere." Be that person.
A glass of Coke, that's all it took. One glass, and Bryce lost his career, his reputation, and cost his company $200 million. But here's what I can't let go of. Wanda could have walked out, Coke dripping down her chest, a man in her face telling her she didn't belong. Nobody would have blamed her, but she planted her feet in that puddle, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "I'm not going anywhere." And Bryce, he wasn't sorry he did it. He was sorry he got caught. That apology didn't come when he poured the drink. It came when he found out her husband was worth $4.8 billion. That tells you everything you need to know. But here's what keeps me up at night. How many people get that same treatment? And there's no Garrett making the phone call, no video, no hashtag, just someone walking out, sulked and humiliated with nobody saying a word. So be honest with me. If you were sitting in that restaurant, what would you have done? Looked at your plate or stood up? Tell me in the comments. If this moved you, like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell. We tell these stories every week. Dignity doesn't have a dress code. Remember that.